Ahuru, comrades. My name is Akilé Anai, and I'm the Director of Media and Communications for the Ahuru Movement.
Uhuru, and my name is Solyana Bekele, and I'm the managing editor of the Burning Spear newspaper, the official organ of the African Socialist Party.
Uhuru means freedom, comrades. I am Jainabah Lumumba. I'm your Southern Regional Representative for the African People's Socialist Party, also known as the APSP. Uhuru.
Yes, Uhuru. And you're now tuned into One Africa Worldview, the weekly news podcast of Burning Spear Media. We're bringing you revolutionary, anti-colonial analysis on local and world events, culture, and more. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure to hit that like and subscribe button for us. We start with our Whirlwind Weekly Update, where we discuss the top news headlines of the week, then head into our primary objective, the main topic of our show. We then transition to For the Culture, where we'll give our reviews and analysis about the latest film, song, or performance that's got our people's attention. Today, we're calling on all freedom-loving people to join the fight for anti-colonial free speech, and we highlight some important precedent-setting cases that you need to be supporting right now. So with that, let's jump right in. Solyana, let's see what we have on the docket first.
Uhuru, so to start off, anti-colonial activities in the Sahel region of the African continent continue to inspire international solidarity in support of the alliance of the Sahel states. This is Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. This alliance is increasingly capturing the imagination of African people everywhere who want nothing less than the total redemption of Africa, and people everywhere who want redemption of the African people everywhere, and the redemption for the benefit of all Black people at home and abroad. And recently, and to much criticism on social media, actually, General Michael Langley of AFRICOM, or the United States African Command, which is basically a military force on the African continent, accused Captain Ibrahim Traore of corruption and misusing the country's gold. This attack on Traore is, of course, made despite the long imperialist practice of U.S. interference in African affairs. And on Saturday, May 10, Captain Ibrahim Traore met with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin to discuss the historical, current, and future relations between Burkina Faso and Russia, of course, to the further chagrin of the West.
Yes, and US President Donald Trump continues Biden-era repression with attacks on free speech. No different than the previous Democratic Party US President and Chief Imperialist Joseph Biden, Donald Trump continues the crackdown on free speech activity that particularly challenges ruling class stability and colonial domination. Such assaults include using Immigration and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE, to detain what's characterized as, quote, non-citizens, or some instances, permanent residences, who participate in pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Tufts University student Rumeisa Ozturk is one of many victims, having been abducted off the streets by masked federal agents on March 25th, a year after co-writing an opinion piece in a student newspaper, the Tufts Daily. She was relocated to an ICE concentration camp in Louisiana, where she was detained until her release on May 9th after a U.S. district judge ordered her release on the premise that her detention constituted a quote-unquote continued infringement on her First Amendment and due process rights.
Uhuru. Grieving African father Rodney Hinton Jr. retaliates against the police murder of his son. It was Wednesday night, April 30th, when a young African named Ryan Hinton was repeatedly calling his uncle to let him inside after a late night out. Helpless, the 18-year-old stayed as safe as he could, unaware that that night would be his last. Thursday, May 1st, Cincinnati police chased an 18-year-old African named Ryan Hinton and shot him multiple times, killing him. He appeared to point a weapon at an officer, the Cincinnati police said, a bold-faced lie to Ryan's family, including his father, Rodney. After the body cam footage revealed the truth that there was no gun being pointed at any officer and that his son was killed in cold blood, he became enraged and ran his car into a nearby deputy, killing him. Based on the viral footage of the innocent African child being killed, there's been an outpouring of support for the actions of this grieving father. The corporation known as GoFundMe bowed to police pressure to remove several popular funding appeals for Hinton's legal defense, an attempt to isolate Rodney. When this brave African father appeared in court, he held his head high and defiantly stared down the gauntlet of police crowding him in the courtroom. As we approach the anniversary of the police murder of George Floyd, we're faced with the reality that Africans in the US are 2.8 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. Today, May 12th, is Rodney Hinton's next court date since we last saw him in that inspiring viral clip of him facing off with the officers. Uhudu.
And we're going to actually play that viral clip right now.
Wow, so powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Define it all.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into it, comrades. We've got, we talked about the Sahel. We've covered Donald Trump and First Amendment and free speech attacks, as well as the case of Rodney Hinton. And just want to unite. What a bold and powerful video, that we see coming from Brother Rodney. And just want to say, touch one, touch all.
Mm-hmm.
So real. So let's get into it, comrades. I think there's a certain irony definitely about this person, Michael Langley, over AFRICOM and criticizing Ibrahim Traore and just the overall what Michael Langley represents for imperialism, for colonialism, and trying to continue to keep African people locked in this place of like remaining docile and not fighting back against colonialism and colonial powers. And what Ibrahim Traore and the people of Burkina Faso and the whole Sahel struggle represent is an era of African resistance, era of we're not going back. And they can't use neo-colonial puppets to keep us in line anymore or anything like that. The covers are off and Africans are going to fight back. So that's what we see. And like with the whole theme that we have here with anti-colonial free speech as well, we obviously not just stand in solidarity, but we represent the struggle happening in the Sahel right here in the US front of the African Revolution. And and like we said, the era of African resistance, that's what Rodney Hinton, represents. They wanted, this African man to accept what do we always see, right? When they kill ours, they come up in the next couple of days with one of those shucking and jiving attorneys, and they're apologizing, and asking us to, hold hands and to not have hate in our hearts and all this mess. Well, Brother Rodney said he ain't having that. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah. And I just also want to say to your point about like the whole thing with General Michael Langley, it's like such a brazen face of neocolonialism. Like this is literally white power in a black face. And it's not a coincidence that they have African people in these heads of, intergovernmental organizations, or even as something as expressly imperialist as the United States Africa Command being run by a black man. And that same black man talking about Burkina Faso's president, I'll call his name out because he was so smug about it too. He's like, I'll call his name out. He's doing this, he's doing that. Meanwhile, completely ignoring that the basis of the world that we know today and the riches that the United States has is from this imperialist attack that the U.S. took part in. Sure, way later than, Europe and everything like that. But U.S. imperialist forces in Africa has been a staple in, I guess you could say, U.S. foreign policy and the way that the extraction of African goods to the United States is facilitated. And so I think that was such a brazen look at neocolonialism. And then the whole thing with Ryan Hinton, it also reminds me of, and we covered this for the Spear. What was her brother's name in Texas? I literally wrote about it in Carmelo Anthony. Again, this whole idea of even younger Africans too, and Chairman talked about this recently, that young comrades don't play no more. Young comrades are fiery. They're standing up, and they're not gonna let white power touch them in any way that in a way that are supposed to be used to, especially when African people resist. It's something that's seen as an aberration, and that the normalization of African people's oppression is what we're supposed to, again, be used to and be not resist against. And then when we do, that's what gets seen as not okay. And so I think there's just a lot to be said about African people rising up right now in just different ways. We have this in the micro sense, and then we have this in a macro sense of the Sahel states, governments coming together and saying we're throwing the colonizers out, right? So,
yeah. And also, I mean, can I be heard well?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I think that just the entire question of Ibrahim Traore and the memory of Thomas Sankara. And I also think about the leadership of Chairman Amalia Shatella, because the question of African unity is blowing up, and it's all a direct result of his incredible theory of African internationalism and all of the work that he's done for decades. And so, that is what led Rodney Hinton to not just look for the specific attacker who attacked my son, right? Mm-hmm. That is what they expect. Oh, they won't do anything. They don't see the police as a state entity. But Chairman Amalia Shatella teaches us who the state is. And now that we know, what we're seeing from forces like Rodney Hinton is a brave, courageous act to say, oh, I see the state as one entity, so I don't have to wait on this particular person to seek vengeance. I'm going to seek vengeance on the state because, we hear this whole thing, 2008, Obama was talking about Black fathers and how Black fathers need to step up and Black fathers are absent and bashing African men. And here we have a young man who finally has raised his child up into where he has become a young man. And it's the state that took his child away from him. And he didn't say, oh, this person took it. He said in that moment, because another aspect is that the state lied to him, just like they always lie to us. When it's our children are the blame. When anything happens in the African community, it's our situation. And so they lied to our family once again, like they've always lied to us. The police work as a gang, they work as a gang in our communities. They work as an armed colonial force, a military force, the arm of the state in our communities. And Rodney Hinton saw right through that. And I felt he knew as if they lied, because before everything even happened, I knew that they lied. And then I hear that this African man had his child ripped away from him, and he saw it right there in broad daylight. He saw the lie, the bold-faced lie, and he got in his car and he didn't wait on the person who attacked his child. He went and said, I'm going to attack the state right back. And I salute that.
Uhuru. I really appreciate that breakdown, Comrade Jainabah, because, like you said, in Chairman Amalia Shatella's analysis about the state, and, it's not, as they always sum it up, one bad apple or whatever, and so that's why it's not enough sensitivity trainings that they can do. It's not enough body cams that they can wear as the state. It's what they were born to do. It's the function of the police, of the courts, all of these institutions that are made to keep the colonized people in check. When we look at the first iteration of the colonial state from this system, it was, of course, the slave catcher who captured, Africans who were, trying to flee the plantation. And that's the reality up to today. The state is a tool of coercion. And they use, violence to, like I said, keep us in check, to protect those who have from those who don't have. And because those who have it at our expense, they stole it. And, so that's just an important reminder. So yes, Rodney sets out to attack directly the colonial state. And it doesn't matter, who was representing it that day, or, how it's being articulated, the recognition, this is the state is my enemy. And that's absolutely true. So yeah, I just really appreciate you, bringing that science and understanding to it. This wasn't just some, bad cop, trigger happy cop or whatever. This is what they're trained to do. And, I just wanted to also, point out this the capitulation of like GoFundMe and, these fundraisers who have no problem raising resources for white nationalists. And it's not surprising. This doesn't come as, oh, I'm so shocked that they would do this. But, just shows how the oppression, the murder, the brutality that Africans experience day in and day out under this colonial mode of production, under this social system, is supposed to be normal. And as Chairman said, when we see these instances of Africans rising up, it's an aberration of the social system. That's not how it's supposed to be. White people aren't supposed to be affected by colonialism, and Black people certainly aren't supposed to strike out against colonialism, when it affects us. And so, but that's what that's what's again, what's normalized, including for Africans ourselves. But again, this era of African resistance suggests that this is not no longer certainly Africa's status quo. So it's rejecting that, and the colonizer has the option to understand that and unite with the African Revolution and unite with the struggle against colonialism, or be victim to it, which is what we're seeing. So just, really profound. Yeah. Oh,
yeah, I was just gonna say too, like, I unite with what you said, and Rep. Jainabah's like summation too, and I feel like everything that we're seeing again just reflects like the historical moment that we're in, and sort of the level of the political conscience of our people, right? Like it's I don't want to say it's a new era, but it is a new era, right? African people are not coming to terms with our condition, but it is a new expression of that we're seeing. And that's why I also really appreciate like the African Internationalist concept of the uneasy equilibrium too, because that also puts into context what, how African people's resistance would be seen as an aberration. But if you understand the uneasy equilibrium, this idea that the social system that we are now used to is upheld by this imbalance, or by this precarious balance of the colonizer oppressing the colonized and the colonized always resisting, that's always going to be the case, right? So how can that be an aberration when since the colonial attack on Africa, African people have always resisted? It shows up in different ways and in different, time periods, and there's explosive iterations of it, like the Haitian Revolution, right? But then there's the Sahel, the alliance of the Sahel states now that we see in the 21st century. So it's like, if anything, African people resisting is normal,
right?
So,
right, yeah. It's certainly the new normal for us. And it's not going anywhere. So, that's, I think, a perfect segue as we get into our next segment for our show, the primary objective. I just, again, really appreciate this discussion that we're having that really sets us up for this discussion today, because we're going to continue to see iteration of African resistance. And the point for us is to get it organized, and to have it organized under One Africa Worldview. And the worldview that we are putting forward is African Internationalism, which is a theory founded and developed by Chairman Amalia Shatella, the leader of the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru Movement, and the African Revolution. And so we're going to talk about this and also, say how we can get organized, to channel all this African resistance in a collective and productive, way towards overturning this social system where, no African parent has to, bury their child. And, Africa and African people don't have to fight to live when the resources are abundant. They're just being stolen. So let's get into it. Our primary objective for this week is around the fight for anti-colonial free speech. First and foremost, it's important to define what anti-colonial free speech is versus what is commonly referred to as the First Amendment or freedom of speech in America. The concept was coined by Chairman Amalia Shatella to explain the basis for the U.S. government counterinsurgency attacks against the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru Movement, for which he leads. Anti-colonial speech refers to speech that challenges the existence of the colonial mode of production, which presently defines all of the economic activity throughout the world. That means talking about the enslavement, dispersal, and colonization of our Africa and African people is engaging in anti-colonial speech. You might not even mean to do it. But when you are talking about, who you are as a people, and, when you are, you call yourself a Garveyite or something like that, that's anti-colonial speech in practice. And it means educating the masses of our people using our own platforms, including this one. That's engaging in anti-colonial speech, conducting protests, community rallies, writing articles, organizing tribunals, running for office, talking about the conditions and oppression and exploitation of Black people, Indigenous Mexican people, Palestinian people, etc. These are all examples of anti-colonial speech. However, the issue of anti-colonial free speech draws out this contradiction of this concept of free speech in America being something that white people conferred upon themselves while Black people were still enslaved in this country. I mean, let's just getting into that just a little bit. I mean, there was no free speech for white serfs in Europe under feudalism. There was the word of the church, there was the word of the king, and but there was no the freedom that white people experience in America today. That happened as a consequence of them attacking the world. That happened as a consequence of them coming here and murdering, near decimating the indigenous people on this land and capturing and enslaving African people. That's how they got their rights. That's how they got their free speech. And, so they conferred this upon themselves while we, were quite literally in chains still in this country. And we understand that the US Constitution not only wasn't written for us, but it was written at our expense to grant white people power to oppress, brutalize, and exploit us. The colonizer gave itself rights to do what it was doing to African people, to indigenous people, and, what it was doing, to the rest of the world. So, these are the rights and the Constitution that they wrote up to give themselves those rights. So over time, as Africans have led rebellions, right? As Comrade Solyana said, Africans have always resisted colonialism. We never accepted this condition of existence laying down. There was always some version of resistance. There was a Nat Turner somewhere, and so as Africans led rebellions to engaging in various anti-colonial political mobilizations, developing organization, throughout the decades to the Black Power movement of the 1960s, this is what contributed to opening up democratic space inside the U.S., where the U.S. now had to give the appearance that there is equality in the law, including the Constitution. So we show that this is not the case, and that the hypocrisy of the U.S. government's inability to uphold its own supposed guiding principles, its own laws, so-called democracy, and its willingness to attack even its own colonizer population if they go against the ruling class position on key issues. So this is what anti-colonial free speech is exposing, is that there is no free speech, right? And that the colonizer creates the law to benefit the colonizer. At any point in time, things are happening in society, in the social system they created, and it's not to their benefit. It's disrupting their entire way of life. Then they move about changing the law, and they will attack themselves in the process. Again, to protect their interests. So if you are unfamiliar, the African People's Socialist Party, a revolutionary Black Power organization founded in 1972 after the defeat of our revolution in the 1960s, came under vicious FBI attacks on July 29th of 2022. In the pre-dawn hours in St. Louis, Missouri, located in the Midwest of the U.S., and St. Petersburg, Florida, in the southern part of the U.S., flashbang grenades, assault rifles, armored vehicles, and flak-jacketed FBI thugs raided 7 homes and offices of the APSP, including the personal home of Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Deputy Chair Ona Zene Yeshitela. At the time, the Department of Justice was preparing its fabricated case, and later that day declared Chairman Omali, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville of the African People's Solidarity Committee, as well as myself, and as unindicted co-conspirators in some elaborate plot to function as secret agents for Russia to sow discord in America. So our crime, they said, was summing up the Ukraine war as a proxy war for colonial powers against Russia. And I think at this point, everybody knows that, but we came out the gate saying it. We published articles in the Burning Spear newspaper that was founded by the chairman in 1968, conducting webinars, much like we're having this discussion right now, running for office, which I had done and Comrade Jesse Neville had done in St. Petersburg in 2017. First time reparations was on the ballot in this country. And among other supposedly protected free speech activities, they said all of this was Russia. Wasn't Black people. We didn't have the wherewithal to think about this for ourselves. It was Russia that tell us to do it, despite the fact that the party was founded in 1972 and the chairman has been doing this work for more than 60 years of his life, right? So this is what they're saying. But I can show you better than I can probably tell you. So I'm going to play this video quickly that, just really illustrates what happened on July 29th of 2022.
This is the FBI. You have a federal warrant for this address. Keep your hands up and follow orders. This is the FBI. We have a warrant for this.
They handcuffed me and my wife out here. They wanted me to sit on the curb while they were carrying this out, something that I refused to do. They wanted my wife to sit on the curb out here, that she refused to do.
As I was coming out, this big old drone met me.
The only revolutionary organization that's done something here on the ground practically for African people is the one that's come under attack. Institution that offers a community radio station, a newspaper, a commercial kitchen, an Aquaba Hall rental space, and community office for our organizers. That was the building that has come under attack.
You need a breach? What do you need?
They want.
I don't know.
I'll hold that with money. Don't take it.
We will build a movement of white people that says hands off the Uhuru movement.
They see in the African People's Socialist Party a vanguard for the struggle for the liberation of our people. They see that because not just what we do here in the United States, but because we had the temerity to do like Garvey, to do like Malcolm X, and take the struggle of Black people around the world.
So 9 months later, Chairman Penny and Jesse would be indicted and forced to stand trial. 2 years, like I said, 9 months later, Chairman Penny and Jesse would be indicted and then forced to stand trial 2 years later. So known as the Uhuru Three, their case set a new precedent for assault on the First Amendment. The violations that we see happening by US President Donald Trump right now on First Amendment activities are just a continuation of what former US President Biden initiated. Trump didn't invent this, what we're seeing now. It was the Democratic Party President Biden, who, and the Justice Department under his administration that attacked the Uhuru movement, that attacked Chairman Amalia Chattel and attempted to essentially give the chairman a life sentence of 15 years in prison on these bogus charges. So the Uhuru movement organized the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition that won the support of organizations and individuals from varying backgrounds that united with the principle that attacking the free speech rights of African and colonized people who speak out about our conditions of oppression, exposes the system responsible, and advocates for solutions would lead to a snowball effect on the First Amendment for everyone, including white people who have generally enjoyed this right at our expense. So this is why, I'm saying that organization is critical. The rise of African resistance is reflective of a very important period in our history, in the struggle against colonialism. However, if it is not organized, if there is not a collective a theory and philosophy that's guiding our collective struggle, then we can be crushed. And so this is what's critical now, is for Africans to come into organization, into the Uhuru movement. So First Amendment activists, some of them right-wingers, as they're called, stood in firm support of the Uhuru Three, even appearing at the trial and speaking out publicly. Forces who would and might never agree with the position of colonialism and freedom for African people. But they were able to get behind this issue because they were able to see the writing on the wall based on what it was that we were, putting forward. So again, Trump is simply a continuation of Biden's attacks on free speech. But as we said all along about our case, the U.S. government was using the African liberation movement as the launching pad for regular assault on the First Amendment. We said over and over that they would use us to get to everyone else. The vanguard, they got to get through us to get to everybody else. So we stand out in front. That's what, so we said that's what they were going to do. And as Chairman Akilé Anai predicted, we see each sector of the colonial ruling class willing to violate their own law in order to protect their interests and fight their political opponents, which includes us on the side of the anti-colonial struggle. So that's why we dedicated our first episode to call on you. We don't want you to just listen. We're not bystanders in this history. We're active participants in making it, in changing the world. And so we're calling on you to engage in anti-colonial speech and push back against the rampant colonial state attacks. When we fight, we win. And we know it. We have evidence of it. We just did it. So joining us today is a special guest and volunteer with one of our sister institutions, Black Power 96.3 FM, based in St. Petersburg, Florida, which you can tune in to via the Black Power 96 radio app for Apple and Android. This sister works as the promotions and marketing coordinator for the station, but has always answered the call to participate wherever and whenever. She was a correspondent during the Burning Spear Media Uhuru 3 trial of the century, as well as the Uhuru 3 trial reenactment theater, all available for viewing on our YouTube channel. So Comrade Mariah, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for agreeing to be a part. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with volunteering for Black Power 96 Radio?
Uhuru, absolutely. And thank you for having me here. I'm truly honored to be here. And I'm just to let you know a little bit about me. I am from the South. I'm right outside of New Orleans along the Gulf Coast. That's where I grew up. That's where I come from. And I come from a background rooted in Black culture and African culture. And we have Creole, we have the food, and you know, the music, we have it all here. So, that's where I come from, that background. And as far as professionally, my background's in business, journalism, storytelling, and social research even. And I've been published in academic journals, authored in several novels, and I've even written for media outlets that focus on culture and social justice. And I also hold a doctorate in business administration, and much of my PhD studies and academic research was actually in popular culture, media, and its influence on our society. So, but despite all of that, formal education and experience, it wasn't until I got involved with Black Power 96 FM that I truly began to understand that the depth of the assault on African people and how colonialism and capitalism are still very real forces shaping our daily lives. I had a lot of unlearning to do, really. And as far as, how I started volunteering, well, I came across the station and I was really instantly struck by how really just unapologetic, it just centered around African people and how we just said it just that, not in just sound, but actually in that strategy. So I heard people speaking truth, that truth to power, and naming the system and organizing to change it. And that's not something you normally find. So especially in mainstream. So I had to get involved. And so I started volunteering, and first it was behind the scenes, helping with writing and stuff like that, communications. And then over time, I just took on more, just started doing the promotions, our social media campaigns, fundraising drives, and just really trying to drive that strategic message there. And today, I help with the branding and outreach side of the station, aligning our voice with the broader goals of the whole Uhuru movement.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's an instance of turning your skills over to the African community. Chairman often talks about this concept of brain drain, where, you know, the skills and the education of like Africans, and particularly on the continent of Africa, you know, Africans will come into the U.S. to get a education, and then, you know, but it doesn't end up going to the African, you know, the African world, you know, and I mean, I'm talking education and, you know, being like doctors, surgeons, and all these, you know, things that are resources for Africa and African people, but they go to benefit the colonizer. But you have taken a totally different approach. You have literally, you are turning over your skills to the African community. And that is just extremely profound. And I'm so honored to be able to work with you. And like I said, I'm so happy to have you, you know, right here, in this discussion. Also, Comrade Dr. Mariah Bond is a featured writer of the Burning Spear newspaper on behalf of Black Power 96 Radio. So you will also find some of her articles in the paper. But speaking of Black Power 96, they are also currently involved in a legal battle as it relates to anti-colonial free speech. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. When it comes to that, it's just that voice being taken away from us, and you know, and what we're doing is fighting back. So just kind of hearing a little bit about that legal battle. It started as part of those FBI attacks on the whole Uhuru movement, and included an assault on its associated economic institutions, which included the African People's Education and Defense Fund. That's the nonprofit led by President Onezene Yeshitela, of which Black Power Radio is actually a part. And this specific attack was the rescinding of grant funds previously awarded to the station in the amount of $37,000 by the Pinellas County Commission on February 14th of 2023. These funds were to improve operations, which included purchasing accessibility equipment for the station manager, Mr. Eddie, who is 100% blind, and that world best blind DJ, and getting that equipment so that word, and we can hear his voice. So overwhelming evidence actually showed the commission collaborated to deny the African People's Education and Defense Funds and BP 96 these funds because of its associations with the broader Uhuru movement, which has fought back for Black community economic development and self-determination. A couple of months later, in April, the APDS second grant application, that one was worth $67,000, was for a backup generator for the building over in St. Petersburg, Florida. And it was actually ranked, that application was ranked 4th out of 79 applicants and was recommended for funding by the Pinellas County Commission. But then they voted to deny it on the same basis. So it's important to note that APEDF's office is in prime hurricane territory and hosts a community commercial kitchen, banquet hall, and offices community organizers. And I'll tell you guys, whenever the power went out in the area, it was the radio station that the community was tapping into to listen to what do we need to do? What do we get resources? How do we survive? So this is the voice that Pinellas County Commission was trying to silence. Okay, so as far as that right there in that heartbeat of that South Side Black community, actually. So the APDF and Black Power 96 followed up with a lawsuit. And that lawsuit was against the commission, which after a year, the judge presiding over the case voted to actually dismiss in collaboration with the attacks on anti-colonial free speech. But BP 96 continues to fight with the powerful support of the law office of Luke Leroux and assigned attorney Rachel Ricks, who submitted an appeal with the federal district court in Atlanta, Georgia on May 6. They're now awaiting a decision with the district court. And you can actually support this case by donating to blackpower96.org/donate or visit a website to learn more about this attack.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mariah, for summing that up. I mean, that's a struggle that's been going on now, as it's showing it's going on almost 2 years that this struggle is happening. And, like you said, it's in tandem with the whole assault on the Uhuru movement and the economic institutions. I want to get your thoughts about experiencing the Uhuru 3 trial via the reenactments and the coverage broadcasts. because you had to participate remotely, so you weren't able to actually be in the courtroom. And for a while, I wasn't even able to be in the courtroom. So having to experience the trial of via these broadcasts, it was very, very powerful. And just want to salute you for your participation in that. But I just wanted to know your thoughts. And was there ever a moment of shock and disbelief?
Yeah, absolutely. Just watching and participating in those reenactments and the broadcast of the trial coverage, it was just really deeply emotional. And even though I've read the history and how I spoke earlier, just really studied the movements and understood oppression academically, it was just something else being able to see that brought to life and frame by frame, and it really, really hit differently. And I'll say, there was even a moment during the broadcast that, at that government attack on that Uhuru movement, when I saw our African people being handcuffed, criminalized, just for simply speaking the truth. And that stops me cold. It just, it's just not in disbelief. It brings anger. And just also brings a moment of, you want to get clarity about this. So, I realize it's not just the history. And this is now. So, and we're in this colonial state and we're reacting to that resistance. So I just remember thinking that if they're willing to go this far to silence us, and we're saying what we must be saying is pretty powerful here. So, yes. That part was actually the turning point for me.
Yes. Well, damn, Comrade Mariah. That was, very powerful. And just like I said, you were amazing during the broadcast, during the reenactments, a superstar. So it's just really incredible to be able to have you on for this discussion today. And before we have to go into our next segment, just wanted to see quickly, like about 30 seconds, Jainabah, Solyana, do you guys have anything you wanted to add?
I just want to salute Dr. Mariah Bond, okay? Because let's get it right. But yeah, just a quintessential volunteer that turns into cadre, and I really relate to how you got introduced into the Uhuru movement, because I myself was a volunteer with the Burning Spear first. So media was my way into the Uhuru movement, and just being amongst the revolutionaries of the Uhuru movement really does develop you into this not just conscious person, but this conscious person that wants to change the world that we have inherited and that our children will inherit. And so it's really invigorating to hear you talk about your experience with BP96 and just what it can mean for other volunteers in the future. So,
yeah, I just want to piggyback off of that. The entire journey is remarkable, and I'm always interested in hearing the journeys of different individuals as they find the party and eventually join the party. And I want, have you joined the party yet?
I am not party member yet.
Oh, okay. I hear the yes. Well, as a Southern regional rep,
all
caps. I'm waiting on the other side for you. All right, yes. I'll be here when you're ready.
Right. She said that's Southern Region rep right there.
Right. Right now.
Wow. And just as we go into our next segment, just want to say you can join the African People's Socialist Party. Go to apspohuru.org to sign up to join. Like I said, we're not on the sidelines of this struggle. We are active participants. We are changing the world right now. And Comrade Mariah, we just appreciate so much your contributions to changing this world and the continued contribution that you make for Africa and the future of African people. So you can support, as mentioned, the lawsuit by going to blackpower96.org, and you can also join the Hands Off Uhuru campaign and support the Uhuru 3 case by visiting handsoffuhuru.org, which, despite the legal and political victories, including no fines and jail time for the Uhuru 3, we still continue with the appeal of the bogus conspiracy charge. So we have to wrap up this section. As I mentioned, it's been so great talking to you, Comrade Mariah. And for all the viewers, Comrade Mariah has agreed to join the One Africa Worldview podcast as a host. So do not fret. You will see her again. And of course, Mariah, if you'd like, you can stay on with us for the rest of the show. And you might definitely be interested in this next segment, For the Culture, where we are giving our analysis on the highly talked about Ryan Coogler film, Sinners, with Comrade Solyana. So take it away.
All right. So Uhuru, yeah. So I'm sure everyone has heard of Sinners at this point, but we're going to give a quick sort of synopsis and then we'll get into it. So Sinners, like director Akilé said, is directed by Ryan Coogler, and it takes place in 1930s Mississippi during the height of the Jim Crow era. It follows twin brothers Stack and Smoke, which is played both by Michael B. Jordan as well as their immensely talented blues-singing younger cousin, Sammy. But in this rendition of the 1930s, the supernatural is very real. And the exposition of the movie actually begins with the idea that profound instances of cultural expression not only have within them the ability to, I guess, weaken the linear fabric of time as we understand it. And by that, I mean how our cultural productions connect us both to our past and future. And this is actually explored in a literal sense in the film, but also how these cultural productions can attract what we may call like culture vultures or forces that, will aim to infiltrate and sort of dilute or generally harm a culture. And without risking spoilers, at least for this synopsis, because if you keep listening, you're going to get spoiled. I'll just say that the story follows the challenges that twins Stack and Smoke face as they attempt to open a juke joint, which is like a club, I guess, in the 1930s for the African community in the Mississippi Delta. And this comes in the form of the KKK, who want to, kill the twins and all the Africans that patronize the juke joint, as well as actual vampires. And this actually ends up being a multiracial group but it starts off with this, one Irishman. And this group of vampires want to, turn all the Africans into vampires and sort of cannibalize the blues culture in this very literal sense. And then most of the movie takes place in one night and in one place. And this is at the grand opening of the juke joint, where Stack, Smoke, Sammy, as well as the other Africans in the area come to, dance the night away, let go of their blues, I guess, so to speak. And this is also where Sammy debuts his talent. And it's during this really unearthly performance, and it's actually my favorite scene of this film, that eventually attracts the vampires and begins the main struggle of the movie in earnest, as these vampires, attempt to transform everyone at the party into vampires, but also literally eat the culture, eat the blues culture. So with that sort of semi-vague, spoiler-safe review, let's open it up for a few minutes. What do we think? And our listeners, we're going to spoil it. So just, if you're okay with it being spoiled, keep listening. So yeah, let's open up. What do we think? First, reactions. I know, Director Akilé, I think you're the one who watched it the most recently. I think Jainabah watched it like 10 times. I watched it once. So who wants to start off? What do we think?
All right, I guess
I'll just jump in and say, as far as just kind of going as the whole discussion as far as that, the cultural vultures. And I mean, we've heard that term over and over. And when it comes to that, in the vampires in this movie, there's not just monsters. There's that metaphor for, that systematic forces that, really have historically oppressed us. And I mean, that's come exploiting the Black communities. I mean, that's both physically and culturally, and we're seeing it here.
Yeah, I mean, I thought there were so many incredible scenes towards the, I know I can't spoil it, but I think like a lot of the visuals were incredible. One of my favorites was just the appreciation for African women and the film. I thought that seeing, the love interests and in terms of even the duality of, the question of the twins and how they were different. I think that it speaks even to a representation of like a colonial expression of the duality of African men, at least under domestic colonialism as we've experienced it here. And I'm really speaking of Smoke and Stack, which is a play on Smokestack Lightning from Howlin' Wolf. That was a really famous song. So I appreciate how Ryan Coogler incorporated, the history into that. Oh yeah, get your blues. I see Comrade Solyana. Yeah, there's a lot of blues references in there. Yeah, okay. Smokestack Lightning by Howlin' Wolf. Go listen to that. It's an incredible song. And in fact, the primary character, I can't remember the tall African's name, but he was in the likeness of Howlin' Wolf himself. So I think it was just very well put together, and I think that I don't want to say set the precedence, but I think it makes us appreciate acts from forces like Rodney Hinton as well. Uhuru.
Yeah. Uhuru. Did you want to say something, Akilé?
I'm trying not to weigh in because I haven't seen the film. And
oh, I thought you did.
no, I'm among the crowd who has not had an opportunity to go see it yet. And so I have so much appreciation though for what it seems to have drawn out. Because I done spoiled it for myself. Okay, so I've seen these writings from African people that are like breaking down this film and like attempting to give it an analysis, and everything that they're saying. It might not necessarily be like the African Internationalist position, but there's a recognition here that it's a reflection of the African resistance we've been talking about since the beginning. And like, this is, just another expression of that. It's the popular culture transforming to the needs and the struggle of African people. And, so while I can't say too much about the film in the particulars, because I just have not been able to see it yet, I just think there's something we, can say and observe about, just the way culture is being shifted based off of the struggles of the people, that Kugler can get inspiration from. And Comrade Solyana wrote a brilliant article about like Kendrick Lamar following his Super Bowl performance. And, so Kendrick Lamar and all these Africans are able to draw this inspiration from real life struggle that's happening and courageous acts of resistance against African people. So as Comrade Jainabah, you referenced, have a greater appreciation for forces like Rodney Hinton, and can relate that to the film. So if you're able to do that, and how many Africans are doing that, and I feel like that's extremely powerful. So that's my little 2 cents.
Hey, those are great 2 cents. Okay, those are some heavy 2 cents. But no, I think you're right. I mean, like it just goes to show, like, I guess pop culture just can no longer sort of ignore this consciousness that African people are, exhibiting. Like, someone as removed from, African working class as Kendrick can no longer just make, can no longer have this halftime performance and not say something about the conditions of African people. Like, that's the point we're at, right? And so I appreciate you, sort of plugging my article in like that. But yeah, and so just I guess we have a few minutes for this section, but something that Comrade Jainabah raised that also stuck with me was like the sort of duality that we see all throughout the movie. I'm gonna try really hard not to spoil it for you, Akilé, but there's like a duality like you see within the twins, but also in the way that like the movie uses spaces for African people, like literal spaces of African self-expression. So like one space is like the church, right? Historically very important to Black people in this time. It was only time that a few decades before the 1930s, it was the only time that enslaved Africans felt like they had a semblance of respite. Although the church comes with its own forms of cultural restraints that the movie actually ends up critiquing through its imagery and sort of depiction of Sammy's father. Because Sammy's father, I mentioned this earlier, he's a pastor, right? And so he sort of represents this very conservative, blues is this devilish culture sort of line that existed, right? And his son is literally like, he wants to be part of that culture, right? That's his thing. And then there's this juke joint, which is also another setting, so another space where African people, create to just be and express joy and culture without the restraints of colonialism directly in their face. And this, of course, doesn't like necessarily mean that the spaces themselves were like immune to the outside world, right? If anything, the movie really gets at how when Black people, get together to create these, I guess you could think of like liberated territory or relatively safe territories, it becomes a beacon for repression. It's something that people would say invites white backlash, right, or colonial attacks on African resistance, because these spaces become spaces of resistance. And I think I think exploring this concept of like the way that African people create these spaces in a horror movie, like what I just think it's interesting, and I think it allows the directors and writers to like get more creative with how far they can take it, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily think of vampires and cultural vultures, but like we can wrap this up here, but I do want our listeners to just sort of think about what does, I guess, like the horror genre do for the exploration of colonialism in cinema and film, Yeah.
They certainly addressed the question of parasitism.
Okay, they did. They did.
And unfortunately, we have to wrap this section up. It is so exciting. We need an article about this as well. It's coming to the Burning Spear. So, just look out for that as well. So we can get into this more. But because there was a question from one of our viewers, Kenya asked, can you speak to the relationship with the Asian community during that period? So check us out in theburningspear.com. You can go to theburningspear.com, our website directly, or go to our Substack, theburningspear.substack.com. You can read cultural analysis like this, on those platforms as well. But very powerful discussion. And as I've been saying, I got to go see this so I can get opinions for myself.
Yeah.
And yes. So I'm about to turn it over to you, Comrade Jainabah.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just want to salute the discussion. It makes me reference Chairman's little black book here, where he says everyone who becomes involved in the process of changing the world changes him or herself as well. In the 1960s, people who one day were simply uneducated sharecroppers went out to try to change the world and were transformed. Makes me think about how the young African went back to the church and made a decision for himself, Uhuru. So for our announcements, I just want to salute to the Black Power Blueprint and the African People's Education and Defense Fund for its successful Giving STL St. Louis Day that raised nearly $12,000 for the African Independence Workforce Program.
Uhuru.
Amazing.
And looking ahead, the Uhuru Planet Reparations Apparel is an institution of Black Star Industries under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. Our mission is to forward the culture of white reparations to African people. And our sales sustain the work of the Black Life community programs of the Uhuru movement. We have almost 40 designs promoting reparations to African people in the anti-colonial struggle. Check out our full inventory here, uhuruplanet.com/t-shirts. We're currently seeking new designs for the classic slogan, Uhuru means freedom. This is an exciting opportunity to contribute your art skills to the African liberation movement. The winning design will be featured as a new product in our shop and will contribute to the liberated African working class-led economy that Black Star Industries is building all over the world to continue the legacy of Marcus Garvey and put Black power back into the hands of the African working class. The deadline to submit is Friday, May 23rd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. And if you have any questions, email info@uhuruplanet.com. That's UHURUPLANET. We're also looking for a way to, if you're looking for a way to support the African self-determination projects of the Black Power Blueprint in North St. Louis, that are uplifting and transforming the conditions of life in the Black community, look no further. The Black Power Blueprint promotions team is seeking volunteer photographers, videographers, graphic artists, social media content creators, engagement specialists, and more. Come to an open meetup on Zoom Tuesday, May 13th from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern to find out more about the Uhuru Bakery and Cafe, the community gardens, the African Independence Workforce Program, the Black Power Vanguard's basketball court, and so much more, and figure out what you can do. Everyone is welcome, but we're especially looking for volunteers in the St. Louis area, and you can learn and get more info at 314-380-8016 or at blackpowerblueprint.org. On Wednesday, May 14th, starting at 6:30 p.m. Central, join the African People's Solidarity Committee for a study on the 50th anniversary of the victory of Vietnam. You can register to attend in person or online at apscuhuru.org/study. And the African People's Solidarity Committee, for those who don't know, is an organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party with a mandate to build the movement for white reparations to African people. And if you want more information, you can visit apscuhuru.org. And last but not least, on Saturday, May 19th from 9 to 5 Eastern in Philadelphia, you can attend the Uhuru African Liberation Day Health Festival and Flea Market in Clark Park, located at South 43rd Street and Chester Avenue. If it's a rainy day, the rain date is Sunday, May 18th, and you can learn more in your local Burning Spear newspaper. That's all we have, and you can learn more about our events at theburningspear.com/events. Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, Jainabah. Thank you, comrades Solyana, Dr. Mariah. And join us again next week at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Burning Spear TV YouTube and Burning Spear Media Rumble channels. Until next time, comrades, this is One Africa Worldview. One Africa,
One
nation.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.